Hello everyone, this is Julie from August Birdsong, and this is part 2 of just a little journal background story of how I create a visual journal. And again, this is my most recent visual journal for the Graphics Fairy design team. The full video can be seen on YouTube under the Graphics Fairies channel. And this is just kind of how I develop my details of what to go into a visual journal. And it usually starts with a general idea. And this particular journal started with a paper I had written about probably 15 years ago or so for a class I was taking for recertification credit because I at the time, I was a teacher. Now I'm a former teacher. I'm not teaching. I don't have my own classroom anymore, except YouTube. But the paper, I titled it The Saint in the Red Suit. And it was on the history and origins of St. Nicholas. And so this particular journal really had been thought out a lot already. Years ago. Not that I knew I was going to make a journal because I wasn't even doing mixed media at the time. And so, for example, here you can see from when I wrote the paper, I had some Christmas books I used. And actually, at that time, I wasn't even using the internet. This was probably about 2005, 2006, something like that. And so I mainly had some library books. I went old school. I had like 2 Christmas books at home that I was using, to get details. And now it's so much easier because so much information can just be found on the internet and all. But this was where it started. And I knew when I was aware that I was going to be able to have a journal in December for the Graphics Fairy, I thought, well, I'm going to, work with my origins of St. Nicholas because I already had so many ideas around that. And so this is kind of how I work, even when it's not the Christmas journal. You can see with my essay, I went in and I highlighted and, boxed important things. You'll notice I boxed a lot of the dates and names and specifics from my paper. And then those are things that ended up being, stamped on the pages in the book. So, for example, here's 1536 when Martin Luther took the night walk and saw the starry heavens and decided to have a Christmas tree inside his house lit with candles. And so it's from those types of notes that I then build all my labels and such. And I just use little stamps. I have these cute little stamps. They're very basic. I know I could just print them off, but I like sort of the simplicity, the look I get just with that basic stamping. And so here you can see like Yule log, different things, jewel niece, another date here, January 5th, when Christmas decorations and the Christmas tree need to be put away, or the tree spirits might give you trouble, and the elves. And so that's a little bit of where that starts. This is just note-taking I did to find out more about what I already knew in my paper. And I've become kind of interested in podcasts. And so I started listening to History Extra podcasts when I was just crafting, like when I was making all of those background pages for the journal. And I would listen to them talk about different history topics. And then if something came up, I had my notebook by me and I'd pause it and I'd jot some details down. And so here you can see, here was something Allison Weir, who wrote A Tudor Christmas, was interviewed, and she was talking about some specific things, and so I marked that down. And here's another one. What was Christmas like in the Victorian era? And that's from History Extra. And so I just mark it so I know where I found it, and could go back to it if I needed to. But I just look for the facts that I feel I can use in my storytelling, and probably also find little bits of ephemera and such that will work well with those facts. Here, Santa letters. This was the details about little Hannah in 1911. And her name was Hannah Howard, and she and her brother Alfred wrote a letter to Santa and let it get drawn up the chimney flue, just in the air as, the flames went up. And if you've seen my video, that's where I talk about the chimney, the fireplace, being sort of a portal in the chimney, and that children believed that their letters were being taken to Santa, not just burned to a crisp. And this one particular letter that was found because it became wedged, I guess, between the bricks, and the house was being worked on, remodeled. 80 years later, it said, "I want a baby doll and a waterproof hood and gloves, toffee apple, gold penny, silver sixpence, and long toffee." And that's what was in the letter. And, so I think about it and I think, well, I could find a picture of a little girl to kind of represent little Hannah. And, I could put a little apple in it. I could put, money, something to represent the money, the baby doll, of course, candy, and something to represent the letter or Santa getting, the letter about that. And so we end up with a page like this. And this is the page where this is like little Hannah, or in this case, I use this little girl as the picture of little Hannah. And I just had another little girl. And these are just images I found on the Graphic Fairies blog under, vintage photos of children. And these all happen to be kind of Christmas related, so that was perfect. And then here I just had the image of the fireplace and 1911 when little Hannah wanted to get that doll. And so that's how these come into development. It's not that I did all this right at the time of finding out about little Hannah. That came actually a number of weeks later. So I heard about, little Hannah on the blog, and it was probably at least 2 weeks later before I actually was starting to even decorate that page, maybe longer. But that's how my process works. I take the notes and I come back to them again and again, highlighting, blocking. When I block it, it means I might want to stamp it, or at least put it in some way, especially. I didn't put the actual quote in of what was in the letter because it was going to be a little too long. Sometimes information doesn't end up in the journal because I just run out of space in time. Here was a thing about carrots being used as a thrifty holiday fare for creating a War and Peace pudding. Remember the plum pudding? Well, during World War I in Europe, and I think, this may have been in England, Great Britain, during World War I, and then again in World War II, there wasn't much meat. I mean, everything was being rationed. There wasn't a lot to get a hold of. So to be a good patriot, people started using carrots, soup, croquettes, which are, I think, sort of like large breadcrumbs, instead of, say, the mincemeat, because it was so hard to get meat and some of the things for it. So they still had a pudding, a holiday pudding, but they were using carrots as sort of the main bulk material in it. Maybe it was also hard to get some of the fruit, definitely the meat, and all of that, or even bread, so they maybe were using like crusts of bread, that the bread they had, they saved some of the crusty parts and then built that into it. And so here you can see baking powder. I referred to this. I found this online actually about when baking powder was actually developed, because you need the baking powder to create the lifting, the CO2 bubbles for a cake to rise. And that wasn't really put in place until 1856. Up until then, I wrote here, yeast was used, but that was very time consuming. And so, baking powder saved a lot of time. And when we go back to Henry VIII's time, they were actually just boiling those Christmas puddings. And so this is kind of how I work. And if you go back, in my little book here, if you saw my ocean boardwalk video this summer, here are notes about being at the beach and seaside holiday with train travel. I used a book I've read that I really enjoy called Close to Shore, and it's nonfiction narrative, but very interesting. And I just collected bits as I read it. And you can see here, what was science and medicine like in 1916? I jotted some things down. What was dangerous as far as getting sick in 1916, measles and polio. So people wanted to go to the ocean for that kind of, to get away from the city where disease was spreading. And so that's that. These are notes I've collected at one point on clothing in the Renaissance. These back here are some other notes on different things that at the time I was interested in my crafting. And I also have the Halloween folklore in here. And a lot of the Halloween folklore came from podcasts as well as just searching on the internet. Putting in questions about, Halloween, Wikipedia, and such, and different variations, of the story of Halloween. Now, I am a former teacher, so for me, this kind of thing is fun. A lot of people probably wouldn't find that fun, but if you do like just collecting, it's the little bits of stories here and there. And when you bring them together in a bigger story, that's, how you end up with a visual journal. But you don't have to have a lot of information just to create kind of, say, a cute Christmas card or a small, journal, and maybe just focus more on the cover or the dividing pages. And, any page in this journal could be like a cover, you could make it into the cover of a book or the cover of a card or a small journal, and just focus in on something, a Christmas card around Charles Dickens, whatever. And so it's not that hard. It's just, what do you enjoy putting your time into with creating it? And so once I have, some of those facts collected, or as I'm collecting them, I start to just kind of troll through the Graphic Fairies bundles. And, I fine tune it sometimes. Like, for example, I narrowed the search to Christmas and what bundles came up under Christmas. And, start there. And then what I do is, on another piece of paper, I start writing down the names of different bundles. So, stained glass windows bundle, the Victorian Christmas bundle, whatever. And that just lets me know, okay, when I'm going to start printing what I want to use, I'll go back and look into that bundle. And then once I go through all the bundle pages, and I'm just scanning them, and when you go on the site and you see the bundles come up, you see these general pages. And so I just look at what's in it. And I can tell pretty quick. I knew right away I wanted the Santa in the moon. And of course, these other Santa images were going to be important. So I knew right away that I wanted to look at this bundle later when I was collecting ephemera. Here's the Dickens Christmas one. And some of these showed up in it. I don't necessarily print off everything. I just look for what do I think is going to work the best. I wanted to talk about the plum pudding and mincemeat, Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. And so that's how I pick what I want. This one I knew. I just loved the colors. And since I was talking about St. Nicholas as a bishop, the boy bishop, he became a bishop in the Christian church at 19, I knew I wanted something to kind of feel like a church atmosphere, and the stained glass windows were perfect for that. And so in that particular bundle, they have, on the printables part of it, you can print these bookmarks off. And so that made it really easy because they're just the perfect size for creating, something. And I thought, well, I think I want to create some doors with them. And so here you can see how I used the bookmarks. I only used 2 there, but I used the bookmarks as the door. And I just put them on top of some book pages, stitched them, and then added some gold trim around it to make it look a little more regal. And there you had the door. It's very basic. The hinges are very basic, but that's kind of the style I go with, and all. And then the images, the ephemera, like this, I found this bishop on the Graphic Fairies blog. And let's see here. I may have found her, just like this pretty angel here. I may have found her in one of the bundles, one of the other bundles. I think there might be one called Angels Among Us, I think is one, or else on the blog. But I just start to kind of collect things. Here you have another bishop that I found on the blog with the first bishop. In this case, this particular one, and some of those ones that I showed you with Krampus, the Krampus cartons, I found those actually on the public domain. And if you just do a search of public domain and then, fine-tune it to your subject, you can find, things that are a little more specific to what you were trying to create. And this just helped with the whole feeling of the church and the bishop and all in it. And Krampus is sort of a unique character in himself. So I knew I had to kind of search for some versions of him. And there's actually many out there, surprisingly. And so here again, you had the dominoes with that stained glass window. And I used some of these. I cut them in half and used them for decorations on the page. Some of the others, again, I just built into the collage work. And then I just go through, and if things are printables, like this is a printable from the Wreath Collage sheet, and it's one of my favorite types of greenery that I use in my ephemera. And so I especially love these ones right here. They're so easy, and they're big and bold. I use this again and again. If they didn't have a printable for something I wanted, for example, let's say I wanted the Hollies and Berry here, well, then I would just go in below this first page. There's a part called, I think it's thumbprints, and you just click on them, copy and then paste and size them on your own document. And you can, do whatever you want with them then. Make them big, small, medium, however you want to use them. So this is just how it kind of works. The story is built on, again, some basic ideas about my subject. I don't have an essay conveniently written for everything I do. That just happened to be this particular journal. And just finding out some basic things to help kind of focus the visual elements that you might want to have in your own card or journal or canvas. So I hope that helps, and I hope you have a happy holidays, and craft many fun items that you give away as gifts or you save for yourself and enjoy looking at year after year. So happy holidays, and I'll talk to you another day. Bye-bye.